Whistle Cove. Chapter 1. The Return to Whistle Cove. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a text message. An actual letter, sealed, postmarked, and aged just enough at the edges to feel like it had waited a long time to be opened. Melanie. Keller almost threw it away. She thought it was a wedding invitation or worse, another real estate flyer targeting her cramped Brooklyn apartment. But something about the return address stopped her. Whistle Cove Campgrounds, Echo Lake, Maine. She hadn't heard those words in over 30 years. Her hands began to tremble as she slit the envelope open. Inside was an invitation, printed on old-style parchment. Whistle Cove Campgrounds is officially reopening this summer. You are cordially invited to the 40-year reunion of Camp Whistle Cove's final season, 1984. June 20th, June 23rd. Lodging, meals, and travel included. Let's come together. Let's remember. Let's finally heal. The Whistle Cove Trust. Melanie dropped the letter like it had burned her. She hadn't set foot near Echo Lake since that summer, since the incident, the one none of them had ever talked about, the one that made the news for 2 weeks and then vanished like the fog that always settled over the water in the early mornings. It had been a drowning, officially. A tragic accident. That's what the papers said, what the camp told the parents, what the counselors were forced to repeat under threat of lawsuit. But that's not what happened. Not really. And now someone wanted her to go back. Melanie didn't sleep that night. She stayed up rereading the letter, researching the camp, checking social media to see if anyone else had received the same invite. Her old friend Kara, now a nurse in Portland, posted a vague status on Facebook. Anyone else get that weird letter from the past? Beneath it were comments from other former counselors. Darren, NYC. Got it. Don't think I'll go. Still gives me the creeps. Toby, Vermont. Going. I need closure. Shay, Boston. I'm in. Heard the cabins are all redone. Kara, Portland. I feel like I have to go. For her. Melanie knew exactly who Kara meant. Ellie. Ellie Summers was only 10 years old the summer she vanished. She wasn't even supposed to be at Whistle Cove. Her family had won a last-minute raffle, a free scholarship spot. The camp wasn't cheap, even back in '84. Ellie's parents were thrilled. It was her first time away from home, her first week at a real sleepaway camp, and her last. They said she went swimming after lights out. That she had a habit of sleepwalking. That she must have wandered to the lake alone, slipped, and drowned. The only problem was, they never found her body, just her shoes, left neatly by the dock. A small flashlight broken, and that awful sound. The whistling. It had started the night Ellie disappeared. A high-pitched, distant sound that floated across the lake. No source, no origin, and no one else heard it as often or as clearly as Melanie. It haunted her dreams for years. In the days that followed, Melanie tried to convince herself not to go. She was a 47-year-old speech pathologist with a stable job and a rent-controlled apartment. She had 2 cats, a therapist she liked, and a coffee shop that knew her name. She didn't need closure. She didn't want to face the past, but she kept hearing the whistle. Not every night, but enough. In her dreams, in her shower. Once when the subway screeched too suddenly into a station. And then, the day before the RSVP deadline, she found a message on her voicemail. No caller ID, no voice, just the whistle. June 20th, 2024, Melanie stepped off the shuttle van and onto the familiar gravel path that led into Whistle Cove. It looked almost exactly the same, the wooden archway, the camp bell, the trail to the cabins. And beyond all of it, shimmering like a trap, was the lake. Echo Lake. Her stomach twisted. There were others there already. Old counselors now grown, some with kids, others alone. A few looked like they hadn't aged a day. Others looked haunted, Mel, Kara, wrapped her in a tight hug. You came. Apparently, Melanie muttered, unsure if it was a mistake. I was hoping you would, Kara said. Her voice was softer than Melanie remembered. Her eyes were sunken. I think we all need this, even if it's just to finally stop looking over our shoulders. Melanie didn't reply. She turned toward the lake, and for the briefest moment, just as the sun dipped behind a cloud, she thought she saw a girl standing on the dock, barefoot, hair dripping wet, gone when she blinked. The cabins were just as she remembered. Weather-worn wood, creaky steps, and screen doors that slammed no matter how carefully you closed them. Cabin 6 was hers again. The name was still carved into the doorframe, M. Keller, 1984. Her fingers instinctively traced the letters. Inside, the air was stale with pine and mildew, but someone had laid out new bedding and lit a lavender candle to mask the must. As Melanie unpacked her small duffel, she noticed something odd. Above the bunk bed, hidden behind a crooked rafter, was a folded piece of yellowed paper. She hesitated, then gently pulled it loose. A drawing. Crude. Childlike. A stick-figure girl standing beside a lake. Next to her, a scribbled shadow with no face. Melanie sat down hard on the bed, breath caught in her throat. That night the reunion began with a bonfire. The new organizers, strangers with crisp polo shirts and fake smiles, introduced themselves as members of the Whistle Cove Restoration Trust. None of them had been there in the 80s. They encouraged everyone to share memories. Most stories were light-hearted, pranks, crushes, campfire songs. Then Kara stood up. She held her marshmallow stick like a microphone. I know we're supposed to be healing tonight, she said, voice wavering. But healing doesn't come without truth, and none of us will ever be okay until we talk about Ellie. The fire cracked. A few heads turned away. She didn't just drown, Kara said. We all know that. A long silence followed. Then Toby, the once charming lifeguard, now graying and heavy-set, cleared his throat. I was on night patrol the day she vanished. I told everyone I didn't see her, that I checked the docks. But that wasn't true. He paused. I saw her, standing on the water, on it, not in it, just standing there. Murmurs. Someone laughed nervously. I thought I imagined it, Toby said. Maybe I still do, but the whistle? I've heard it every year since. Melanie felt her stomach flip. Later, after the bonfire, Melanie wandered to the dock. The moon was full, glinting off the lake like silver oil. She stood there for a long time. That's when she heard it. Eeeeee. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. Melanie turned sharply. No one was there. But as she looked back to the water, she saw it again. A girl, floating just beneath the surface, eyes open, mouth frozen in a scream. Melanie stumbled backward and fell hard onto the dock. When she looked again, the water was smooth, empty, silent. She backed away, heart pounding. In the distance, a soft sound echoed through the trees, another whistle, longer this time, more urgent, not from the lake, from the forest. Melanie couldn't sleep. She lay in the bottom bunk with her eyes fixed on the wooden slats above her, watching the dancing shadows cast by the moonlight filtering through the window. Every creak of the cabin made her flinch. Every gust of wind that rustled the trees outside made her think of that sound, the high-pitched whistle that didn't belong to any bird or breeze. Around 2 a.m., she gave up trying. Slipping into her sneakers and throwing on a hoodie, she grabbed her flashlight and quietly slipped outside. The night air was cool, but not biting. Mist curled low over the grass, especially near the edges of the lake. She headed toward the old mess hall. Maybe a cup of tea or something to eat would settle her nerves. Halfway there, she saw something, or someone, moving near the flagpole. Hello? she called softly. The shape froze. Melanie raised her flashlight. The beam illuminated a young girl in pajamas, standing barefoot in the grass. For a second, Melanie's heart nearly stopped. The girl looked just like Ellie. Same strawberry blonde hair, same small frame, same vacant expression. But this girl blinked and spoke. "I heard the whistle too," she whispered. Melanie exhaled sharply. What's your name?" "Lila," the girl said. "I'm one of the campers. My mom's a counselor." "What are you doing out here, Lila?" The girl looked toward the lake. "I heard her call me." Melanie followed her gaze. The water shimmered like glass. "Don't go near it," Melanie said, stepping in front of the girl. "She's lonely," Lila whispered. That was when Melanie noticed the girl's arm. Long scratches like fingernails ran down from her elbow to wrist. "Did you do that to yourself?" Lila didn't answer. She just turned and walked slowly back toward the cabins, disappearing into the fog. In the morning, Melanie searched the registration board. There was no camper named Lila. None of the listed counselors had a child on the premises. She found Kara by the lake later that afternoon. "There was a girl," Melanie said. "Last night. She looked like Ellie. She called herself Lila. She had scratches on her arms." Kara paled. Lila Summers was Ellie's twin sister. She died of pneumonia 6 months before camp. "No, that's not possible. I saw her obituary. Ellie's parents told me." Melanie's knees weakened. She sat down on a log. Kara stared across the lake. "You remember what the old groundskeeper used to say?" Melanie shook her head. "If you hear the whistle," Kara murmured, "don't answer. Don't follow. Don't listen." That evening, a storm rolled in. The wind howled through the trees like a living thing. Rain lashed the rooftops. Lightning struck somewhere on the far side of the lake, splitting an old pine in half. The camp's power flickered, then went out. Melanie stood at her cabin window, staring into the darkness. The lake glowed faintly, unnaturally, as if lit from beneath. Then another sound, not a whistle this time. Laughter, childlike, bubbling, coming from the trees. She stepped away from the window, heart in her throat. Outside, something knocked on her cabin door. Once, twice. Then the handle turned. Melanie froze. The sound of the metal handle scraping against the frame jolted her heart into overdrive. It didn't open, but it tried to. Her breath hitched. She crept backward, across the cabin floor, eyes fixed on the door. The silence that followed was deafening. Then a whisper, just on the other side of the door. "Let me in." Melanie's blood turned to ice. She backed against the bunk bed, groping blindly for anything to use as a weapon. Her hand landed on a metal flashlight. She raised it like a club. Another whisper, closer this time. "I'm cold. I don't want to be alone." The door rattled once more, then stopped. She didn't sleep. She sat there, flashlight in hand, until dawn crept through the cracks in the wood. When she finally stepped outside, the world was calm. Birds chirped. The storm had passed, but on the porch, just outside the cabin door, was a set of wet footprints. Small, barefoot. They led to the door, but none led away. Later that day, the counselors met in the main lodge for a scheduled reunion brunch. Pancakes, juice, forced laughter. Everyone trying too hard. Melanie barely touched her plate. "I think something's wrong," she whispered to Kara. Kara didn't meet her eyes. "You think it ever stopped being wrong?" There was a sharp rap on the window. Everyone turned. Outside, standing behind the glass, was a child, soaking wet, hair plastered to her skull, face pale, eyes dark as voids. She pointed at the group, then disappeared. Utter silence filled the room. "I saw that too, right?" Darren finally asked. No one answered. One of the new trust members, a young man named Reed, cleared his throat. Everyone. It's probably just one of the kids playing a prank, he said, smiling too widely. Let's try to focus on the positive. We're here to reconnect, to heal. Melanie stood up. No, she said. We're here because someone or something wants us back. Heads turned, whispers rippled. She's right, Toby added. That lake, it remembers. Kara's voice was barely above a whisper. And it wants us to remember too. That night, another camper went missing, a boy named Miles, 11 years old. Last seen near cabin 9. His sleeping bag was empty. His flashlight was found on the dock. Still on. Flickering, the counselors formed search groups. They scoured the woods, the lake perimeter, even the old boathouse. But there was no trace of Miles, only a single wet footprint, right outside the flagpole, and the distant sound of whistling, yo. Next morning, the camp buzzed with uneasy energy. Reed called a meeting in the rec hall. The trust wanted to downplay the situation. He probably wandered off during the night, Reed said, pacing in front of the dusty ping-pong table. We'll keep searching. The police have been notified. But we ask everyone to remain calm. We don't want to alarm the campers. Melanie stood in the back, arms crossed, wandered off into fog thick as soup with no shoes. She snapped. You've got to be kidding. He was 11, Kara added. Kids don't just vanish. Not like this. Another counselor, Joey, a quiet man in his 50s, spoke up. This is exactly how it started in '84. First Ellie, then the shadows, then the dreams. Reed laughed nervously. Dreams? I dreamed of Ellie last night, Melanie said quietly. She was under the lake, reaching for me. The room fell silent. I saw her too, Kara admitted. Joey nodded. We all saw her eventually. Reed opened his mouth, but no words came. Something in that lake wants us, Melanie said. It's calling us. We've ignored it for too long. Then why are we here? Someone asked. Toby looked around the room. Because we were invited back, and not just by that trust letter. He held up his phone. The screen was cracked. The message history was blank, except for one text. Come back, sent at 3:33 a.m. No number, no trace. That afternoon, they found Miles's hat on the northern bank of the lake. It was soaked. And tucked inside the brim was a piece of paper, a hand-drawn picture. Stick figures, one labeled me, one labeled her. The second figure had hair covering its face, long black lines dripping downward, and beside the drawing scrawled, in a trembling hand, she's still under. Melanie had to sit down, her heart hammered in her chest. It wasn't just ghosts. It wasn't just trauma, it was happening again, and this time it was stronger. The lake was hungry. That night, Melanie locked herself in her cabin. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't eat. She sat by the window watching the lake from a distance. The moon cast long silver lines across the water, and there, just beneath the surface, something moved. A shape. A ripple. An outline that shifted with unnatural grace. Then the whistle, louder now, inside her head. She pressed her hands to her ears, but it didn't help. Over and over, until she fell to the floor, weeping. She wasn't sure when she blacked out. But when she awoke hours later, she was standing barefoot at the edge of the dock. The lake was perfectly still, and in her hand was Ellie's old flashlight. The same one they'd found in 1984. She dropped it. The flashlight hit the dock with a metallic clatter and rolled to the edge, then stopped, teetering halfway into the water. Melanie backed away in horror. Her breath came in short gasps, cold mist curling around her ankles. She wanted to scream, but the sound stuck in her throat. Somewhere deep inside, something old stirred. A buried memory, sharp as broken glass, a girl, a scream, the splash, and that sound. The whistle had come first, Then the water turned black and Ellie vanished. The next morning, Melanie found Kara already awake, standing outside the dining hall with a cup of coffee clenched tightly in her hands. Her face was pale, and her eyes were bloodshot. "I think I saw her last night," Kara said quietly. "Standing in the trees. She didn't move, just watched me. She was in my cabin," Melanie whispered, "or something pretending to be her." They stood in silence as the fog began to lift from the lake, revealing the first rays of sunlight glinting off the water's unnaturally calm surface. "She's not gone," Kara said finally. Melanie nodded. "She never was." Later that afternoon, the Trust announced that the reunion would continue as scheduled, despite the still missing camper. They claimed the authorities were searching the perimeter and that everything was under control. But the counselors knew better. The lake had chosen, and it wasn't done. That night, no one gathered around the bonfire. No songs were sung. No stories shared. One by one, the remaining guests barricaded themselves in their cabins, but not Melanie. She stood alone on the dock, holding a lantern, waiting. She didn't know why she came out, only that something inside her needed to. That's when she heard the crunch of footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting Kara, or maybe Toby, but it was a child, soaked, barefoot, wearing a tattered camp t-shirt from decades ago. Ellie, or what was left of her. The girl's eyes were dark voids, her skin a pale gray that shimmered in the lantern light like the belly of a fish. She opened her mouth, and the whistle came out. Not a breath, not a voice, just that piercing, shrill, high note that seemed to split reality itself. Melanie dropped the lantern, the dock caught fire, the lake, still and dark, opened. And the last thing Melanie saw before the water swallowed her whole was Ellie's hand reaching forward, not to save her, but to pull her under. Chapter 2. The Camp That Doesn't Forget. The morning after Melanie vanished, no one said her name. Not at breakfast, not during roll call, not in whispers between the cabins. Her absence hung in the humid air like the mist that refused to lift from the surface of Echo Lake. Her bunk remained made, her shoes still by the door, her duffel bag still neatly packed beneath the bed. Only Kara kept looking toward cabin 6. She wouldn't have left, she muttered under her breath, not without saying something. Reed, the trust coordinator, had an explanation ready. She probably took a walk and got disoriented. The authorities are looking. We've already notified her emergency contact. But his voice lacked conviction. The words felt thin. That morning, the fog never burned off, and the lake stayed unnaturally. Still, at 11 a.m., Toby and Kara met behind the mess hall. "She told me something," Kara whispered. "The night before she disappeared. She saw Ellie." "I've been seeing things too," Toby admitted. "Or hearing dreams, whispers, and that damn whistle." He stopped and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his back pocket. It was wet, faded, as if it had been in the lake. It was another drawing, this time a cabin with stick figures all sleeping inside, and one black figure standing at the foot of each bed. "She said she found something in her cabin," Kara said. "A journal from 1984. Toby's brow furrowed. "What kind of journal?" "I don't know, but if she left it behind, it's still in cabin 6. Kara didn't wait. She walked straight to the cabin, her pulse pounding in her throat. She swung the door open, ignoring the way the air seemed to suck inward, as if the room had been holding its breath. Everything was in place, except for the smell, a faint briny odor, like seawater and decaying leaves. Kara dropped to her knees and reached beneath the bed. Her fingers brushed against something cool, a leather-bound journal. She opened it. The first page read, "Property of Ellie Summers." The entries were dated in June of 1984, and they began, innocently enough, Camp is fun. The lake is big and cold. My counselor is nice. Her name is Melanie. But then, I heard music last night, but no one was playing it. There's a girl in the water. She looks like me. She whistles when I'm asleep. And finally, she said I have to come, that I promised, but I didn't. I didn't promise anything. Kara flipped faster. I told the water girl no. Now she's mad. She took my flashlight. She said if I don't come tonight, she'll take Melanie instead. The last page was soaked through. The ink bled like a wound. Kara sat on the bunk, breath shallow. Ellie's ghost hadn't come for closure. She had come for vengeance. That night, the camp staff held a mandatory meeting. Reed tried to calm everyone. Look, we've had 2 disappearances. We're doing everything we can. But we can't just evacuate the entire site based on superstition. Kara stood. 2? What about the child I saw by the mess hall window, the girl no one claims to know? She's not on any roster, Reed replied. She matches the description of Lila Summers, Kara said, Ellie's twin. She died before the camp season ever began. Then explain how she walked into my cabin last night and whispered my name. The silence that followed was deafening. That's when the lights went out, all of them. Every lantern, every floodlight, every emergency backup, plunging Whistle Cove into a darkness deeper than any night had the right to be. And then, from the lake, the whistle, long, piercing, beckoning, and no one who heard it would ever forget it. The scream came next. It tore through the dark like a jagged blade, silencing frogs, insects, everything. A shrill, panicked cry from the eastern path near the old canoe shed. Kara didn't think. She ran. Toby was close behind, holding his phone like a lantern, its flashlight stuttering. The fog had returned, thick and choking. It clung to their skin, crept into their lungs, and seemed to muffle sound as they ran. The scream came again, closer now, childlike, raw. They reached the shed. The door was hanging open, creaking on rusty hinges. Inside, old paddles, overturned canoes, waterlogged life vests, and something more. A boy, huddled in the corner, knees to chest, rocking back and forth. Miles, Kara whispered. The boy looked up. It was him, pale, shivering, eyes wide. With terror, she let me go, he rasped. Kara fell to her knees. What? Who let you go? The girl in the lake, the one who whistles. She said. She already got who she wanted. He looked past them, toward the lake, as if expecting it to rise up and take him again. Toby knelt beside Kara. We have to get him out of here. They led him back slowly. Each step felt like a mile. The fog watched them. Back at the lodge, the campers were all accounted for. Shaken, but safe. The emergency generator buzzed to life, bathing the main building in dull yellow light. Miles sat, wrapped in a blanket, sipping cocoa. She pulled me under, he said softly. I didn't want to go, but I heard her. She was sad, angry. She kept saying, "You promised. You said you'd stay." Kara exchanged a look with Toby. She thought he was someone else, she said. Melanie, Toby answered. No, Miles said. Not her. Me. Kara froze. What do you mean? Miles hesitated. I had a dream before camp about a lake and a girl in the water. I drew pictures. My mom thought it was just nerves. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a crumpled paper. The drawing was of the lake and two figures, a girl underwater and a boy on the shore. A speech bubble above the girl read, "You said you'd stay." That night, Kara returned to cabin 6. She opened Ellie's journal again, searching for answers. On the inside of the back cover, something had appeared. A message, written in wet, ink that hadn't been there before. She remembers who made the promise, and she's still waiting. Kara barely slept. She stayed in the cabin, Ellie's journal clutched tightly in her lap, lit only by a flickering battery-powered lantern. Outside, the forest groaned, the lake whispered, and every once in a while, somewhere, far but near, came the sound she feared most, that whistle. It threaded through the darkness like a hunting call, gentle at first, then more insistent, like something was drawing breath from beneath the water just to sing it. And yet, no one else heard it that night. No one else but Kara. She waited until dawn, then left her cabin and walked to the rec hall. She found Toby asleep in a chair, his arm wrapped protectively around a rusted first aid kit like a child clutching a teddy bear. He looked like he hadn't rested in days. "Toby," she said, shaking him gently. He jolted awake, wide-eyed, scanning the shadows. "Is it still dark?" "It's morning," she replied. "We need to talk." With the rest of the camp still quiet, they sat at a picnic table under the covered pavilion. Kara spread out Ellie's journal and Miles's drawing. Then she unfolded something else, an old camp map she'd found tacked to the back of the main bulletin board, nearly torn in half and faded with age. "There's something wrong with this place," she whispered. "Obviously," Toby said dryly. "No, I mean structurally. Look." She traced her finger along the layout. The original campgrounds from the 1940s had 12 cabins arranged in a half-circle around the lake, but there was a 13th building here. She pointed to the northern bank. A chapel. It's not on any of the new maps. They must have buried it in renovations. So that's where Ellie went in one of her dreams. I remember her saying she had nightmares of a white building where someone was crying inside. She said a voice called to her from behind a curtain. "You think the chapel is connected to all this?" "I think it's where everything started." Toby rubbed his face. "Then we go there." They left after lunch, when the counselors were distracted corralling the remaining kids into a craft session. Kara and Toby grabbed flashlights, gloves, and a rusted crowbar from the maintenance shed. They crossed through the woods on foot, using the map and a compass Kara hadn't touched since 1984. The northern bank was thick with overgrowth, vines wrapping trees like serpents. Birds didn't sing here. The air was colder, then they saw it, or rather, what remained. The old chapel was little more than a foundation and one rotting wall, hidden beneath layers of moss and years of forest debris. The door had collapsed inward, and the windows were long shattered. But something was still intact, a basement door, heavy, wooden, partially sunken into the earth, sealed with a rusted latch. Toby jammed the crowbar beneath the handle. The wood shrieked in protest, but finally gave way. A blast of air hit them, damp, cold, and foul. They stared into a stone stairwell descending into the dark. A sound rose from within. Not a scream, not a whisper, a whistle. Closer than ever. Kara descended first. Each step down the old chapel stairwell echoed, damp with rot and chilled by air that felt wrong. Her flashlight flickered, casting long, warped shadows across the stone walls. Carvings lined the bricks, most worn and unreadable, but a few symbols remained visible. Crosses, circles, runes Kara didn't recognize. And one strange motif that kept repeating, a girl standing in water. Toby followed silently, his own beam, illuminating what looked like melted candles stuck to the walls, half-burned as if an old ritual had been interrupted and left to decay. The stairway ended in a low room with arched ceilings. The air was so thick with mildew it was hard to breathe. At the far end of the basement stood a wooden altar. Behind it, a torn velvet curtain. Kara moved closer, heart racing. There were child-sized handprints in the dust on the altar surface, some fresh, some decades old. "Is this where she brought them?" Toby whispered. Kara didn't respond. She reached for the curtain, pulled it aside, Behind it was not a wall, but a tunnel, carved crudely into the earth, sloping downward toward the direction of the lake. "It's not just a chapel," Kara said. "It's a gate." As she said the words, they both heard it again, louder now. Ew. But it wasn't just sound, it was inside them, a pressure, a vibration in the bones, a memory they'd never had, but one their blood recognized. The whistle was calling, and part of them wanted to answer. Back at the camp, the weather shifted violently. Clouds rolled in like an advancing army. Thunder cracked over the lake. The children were ushered inside by frantic counselors, and in the empty dock, where Melanie had last stood. A second flashlight surfaced, glowing from beneath the water. A bubble of breath rose beside it. Someone was coming up. Inside the tunnel, the air thickened. Roots hung like fingers from the ceiling. The sound of dripping water was steady, like a metronome. After 10 minutes of descent, the tunnel opened into a hollow chamber. A pool sat in the middle, black, still, and perfectly circular. Around its edges were trinkets, shoes, dolls, a plastic whistle. A photograph burned at the edges. Kara stepped closer. Floating just beneath the surface was Ellie's face, eyes open, mouth agape. Then she blinked and reached up. Kara staggered backward, falling onto the dirt floor with a scream. Toby rushed to her side, his flashlight beam catching nothing but ripples. "She was there," Kara gasped. "She looked right at me. She's not dead." Toby's eyes scanned the black pool. "Maybe not in the way we understand it." Suddenly, a sound like dozens of pebbles falling into the water echoed around them. Subtle, soft, but coming from every direction. Kara turned. The trinkets lining the edge of the pool were moving, shifting toward the water, sliding without touch. The whistle rose again, this time impossibly loud, echoing through the hollow space with a pressure that made their noses bleed. Kara screamed, clutching her ears. Toby dropped his flashlight. The beam spun wildly, illuminating the ceiling above them, where dozens of childlike faces were carved into the stone, some smiling, some screaming, all watching. "We need to go," Kara cried. Toby grabbed her hand and yanked her up. They ran back through the tunnel, chased by the sound. No longer just a whistle, but voices layered within it. Children, laughing, pleading, calling names that weren't theirs. At the top of the chapel stairs, the fog had thickened, and the air smelled of brine and decay. They burst through the door and collapsed onto the mossy earth, gasping. Behind them, the chapel groaned, then went still. Kara didn't speak for a long time. Neither did Toby. When they finally rose, they walked back to camp in silence, the journal still tucked beneath Kara's arm. That night, lightning struck a tree near the boys' cabin. It burned red and blue as the children screamed. Miles didn't wake up. He was breathing, but whispering over and over. "She's walking now. She found the gate. She's coming through." Kara stood at the edge of the dock, soaked in sweat, her flashlight in one hand and Ellie's journal in the other. The lake glowed faintly beneath a swollen moon, and then she saw it, reflected in the water just behind her. A girl, hair soaked, eyes hollow, grinning. Kara turned. There was no one there, just the whistle, slowly drifting closer. Chapter 3. Whispers in the fog. The fog did not lift with the sunrise. It clung to Whistle Cove like a second skin, thicker now, heavier, as if the entire forest was exhaling something ancient and unseen. Trees vanished, only a few feet into the haze. Shadows moved without origin, and somewhere deep within it the whistle continued, not constant, not loud, but always there. A breath on the wind, a cry too high for human ears, a call you only heard when you were alone. Kara didn't tell anyone what she saw on the dock. Not yet. She kept Ellie's journal hidden inside her pillowcase. every page, committed to memory. She hadn't shown Toby the final entry that had appeared sometime during the night, just after the storm, scrawled in that same wet black ink. If the fog reaches the cabins, it's too late. She believed it. It was already curling around the mess hall steps. Reed was losing control. He stood in front of the assembled counselors, clipboard in hand, trying to project calm. But his eyes twitched and his voice cracked every few sentences. I want to reassure everyone that what we're experiencing is just an unseasonable weather pattern. The storm, combined with the lake's humidity, has created an unusual amount of fog. It's temporary. You didn't hear them, Joey said. His voice was flat, like someone already halfway to giving up. Last night, children, crying, in the trees. I checked every cabin, Reed snapped. Every child is accounted for. Kara raised her hand. That doesn't mean the children are safe. Reed ignored her. We are not canceling the reunion, he said. Not unless instructed by authorities. This camp has a long-standing reputation and I won't be the one to tarnish it because people are spooked. You won't be the one to explain another disappearance either, Kara muttered. The room fell into a tense silence. Outside, the fog thickened, and someone began to whistle from just beyond the window. Everyone froze. The sound was unmistakable, shrill, trembling, distant, yet close, as if it bypassed the air and vibrated directly inside their skulls. Reed stood stiff, eyes locked on the window. Joey backed up slowly until he bumped into the wall. Don't open the door, Kara said quickly. Don't move. Reed scoffed. It's probably one of the kids playing games. No kid knows that whistle, Toby said from the doorway. He hadn't been in the room until now. His face was pale, lined with fear. What are you talking about? Reed asked. The whistle. The real one. You can't fake it. It doesn't sound like anything alive should make. More silence. Then the window fogged up. Just one pane, right beside where Reed stood. A small handprint appeared in the condensation. Then another. Then a face, a girl's face. Eyes black, mouth open, hair soaked. She pressed her forehead against the glass. Kara screamed. Joey fell to the floor. Reed stumbled backward. Jesus Christ! But when they opened the door to chase whoever or whatever it was, the fog rushed in like a wave, and there was nothing on the porch but wet footprints leading toward the cabins. That night, 2 campers began speaking in their sleep. They didn't share a cabin. They didn't know each other, but their voices spoke in unison. She remembers the broken promise. She remembers the drowning. She remembers who let go. She remembers you. And then they sat up, eyes open, but not their eyes. Kara and Toby kept watch outside cabin 6. They had pulled mattresses into the main hall and lit every lantern they could find. Miles refused to speak anymore. He sat in the corner humming the tune of the whistle over and over, soft, mechanical, trance-like. I think it's spreading, Kara whispered. Toby nodded. It's like the lake is moving through them. No, Kara said. Not the lake. She showed him the latest entry in the journal. Another sentence had appeared in the same cursed ink. She doesn't need the water anymore. She walks now. The next morning, a strange silence settled over. Whistle Cove, the birds were gone, no wind, no rustle of leaves, just fog. It crept beneath cabin doors now, curled around bed frames. It coated windows and left frost-like webs on the mirrors. Some campers had nosebleeds. Others refused to speak. A few couldn't remember their names. By noon, Kara realized the fog wasn't just spreading, it was feeding. Toby tried to call for help. No signal. Reed powered up the old ham radio in the basement of the rec hall. Static. Then something strange. Echo. Lake. She has risen. The voice cut in and out. A child's voice. then garbled screeches, then silence. Toby ripped the power cable from the wall. "She's using it to speak," he said. "To reach out." "To who?" Kara asked. He looked at her, pale. "Everyone." That night, the fog turned black. Not visually, but in feeling. The air became heavy, like breathing through wet ash. The children had to be sedated. One girl tried to claw her way through a cabin wall, screaming about the red room under the lake. Kara checked the journal again. Another message had appeared. She speaks through the cracks, through mirrors, through mouths that no longer know they're hers. She is awake. Kara stood by the lake with Toby, staring out at the still surface. "She's breaking the rules," Toby muttered. "There were rules?" Kara asked. "There were always rules. Spirits, curses, hauntings. They follow patterns. They're limited by what we believe. She's not a ghost." "No," he said. "She's becoming something else." They turned at the sound of splashing. Only to see another camper walking straight into the water, eyes wide, unblinking. "She's calling me," he said. Kara ran and grabbed him, pulling him back. He fought like a wild animal until he suddenly collapsed into her arms, sobbing. "She said we all made the promise, all of us, even the ones not born yet." Kara shuddered. "What promise?" He looked at her, voice trembling. "To stay." That evening, the fog crept so thick across the camp that lanterns could barely pierce more than a few feet ahead. Shadows moved between cabins, slow, deliberate shapes that didn't belong to anyone alive. Joey saw one of them from cabin 10. It stood perfectly still on the path, halfway between the bonfire ring and the showers. A tall figure, but flickering somehow, like light bent around it. It had no face, no hands, just presence, like it had stepped out of a memory too old for the earth to hold. He blinked. It was gone, but muddy footprints led up to the cabin's steps and stopped. Kara began marking the affected cabins on a map. By the next morning, over half had experienced activity. Moving objects, cold spots, unexplainable scratches on walls. One cabin had a mirror crack overnight. No one had touched it. Inside that crack was a word etched deep: stay. Toby insisted they relocate the remaining campers into the main lodge. Safety in numbers, light, movement, but Reed protested. "You're going to scare them worse than they already are." "They should be scared," Kara said, "because we are." Reed didn't reply. He hadn't been the same since the fog touched his window. Later that day, Kara checked on Miles. He was still silent, his eyes empty, except for when he was drawing. Dozens of pages now. All of them the same theme: a lake, a girl, and people walking into the water. In one, the fog had hands. In another, Kara saw something new, a gate beneath the lake, and something bigger than a girl trying to push through it. Not Ellie. Something older. Something watching from the deep. That night, Kara dreamed she was underwater. Not drowning, but walking, slowly, weightlessly. Around her were the cabins, submerged, the mess hall, the dock, the chapel ruins, all at the bottom of a black lake. She turned, and Ellie was there, dripping, smiling, one hand outstretched. "Why did you let go?" Kara woke up screaming. A thin layer of water covered her floor, and a single whistle was left on her pillow. Kara wrapped the whistle in a towel and shoved it into the bottom of her duffel. She refused to touch it with her bare hands. She refused to listen to it again. Downstairs in the lodge, Toby had barricaded the windows and placed salt around every doorframe. It wasn't in the official counselor handbook, but desperate times called for old stories. "You think it'll help?" Kara asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "But when the thing you're fighting isn't alive, you fall back on folklore." They heard a crash from outside, not thunder, A tree had fallen. Directly across the main path, blocking the road to the highway, Kara's stomach dropped. "It doesn't want us to leave." "No," Toby whispered. "It never did." That night, someone knocked on the lodge door. 3 soft raps, then silence. Joey peeked through the peephole. "It's a girl," he said slowly. "Dripping wet. She's humming." Kara stood beside him. The girl was no more than 10. Her hair covered her face. Her arms hung limply at her sides. She wore a faded Whistle Cove t-shirt from a decade no child here had lived through. "She's not one of ours," Kara said. "Do not open the door." "I think she's mouthing something," Joey said. "It's hard to tell. Wait. She's saying your name." Kara stepped back. The girl's mouth moved again, then stopped, and a high, inhuman whistle echoed from behind her lips. The glass in the nearest lantern shattered, the lodge plunged into darkness, and outside the fog swallowed the girl whole. By morning, 4 campers were missing, their beds untouched, their shoes still beside them, but the floor was wet, and each bunk held a whistle in place of the child. Chapter 4. The Ones Who Never Left. No one left the lodge that morning. They sat huddled in corners, watching the fog press against the windows like a living thing. There was no breakfast, no morning bell, just the slow, sickening realization that Whistle Cove had become a trap, and they were the bait. Reed was gone. At some point during the night, he'd slipped out. His bunk was cold, his boots were gone, so was the radio, but his whistle remained, neatly placed on his pillow. Kara stood at the door, heart pounding. The fog had changed again. It wasn't just thick. It was darker, denser, more intentional, like it was watching, waiting. "Don't open it," Toby said quietly from behind. We're not ready." "Ready for what?" Kara asked. He didn't answer, because in truth, they both knew. This wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about remembering and facing the ones who never left. At noon, they heard singing. It drifted in faintly through the cracks in the walls, as though the forest itself was humming. A lullaby, off-key and slow, sung by many voices in unison. Kara pressed her ear to the window. They were children's voices. And then, footsteps. Soft, wet. Shuffling past the lodge's porch, a knock, then another. 3 raps on the back door. Joey reached for the curtain, but Kara grabbed his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "We don't invite them in. Ever." He nodded slowly. "But what if it's one of ours?" Kara's face hardened. Then they wouldn't need to knock. That night, as the campers slept uneasily in their makeshift beds, Kara sat by the fireplace reading Ellie's journal by flashlight. Most of the pages had bled into one another now, the ink turning darker, thicker. Sometimes it seemed to rearrange itself when she blinked, but one page was clear, a crude map of the camp. With one red circle drawn around the chapel ruins, beneath it, one sentence. "Where they sleep, she waits." "She?" Kara whispered. She closed the journal. There was only one way to find out. The next morning, Kara and Toby slipped out before the others woke. They didn't announce their plan. They couldn't. Not with the children watching them with eyes that no longer blinked at the right times. They crossed the clearing with lanterns lit and salt in their pockets. The fog had shifted again. Lower now, pooling around their ankles, like the camp was ankle-deep in milk. Every few steps, Kara thought she saw faces in the mist, some old, some familiar, but none alive. The chapel ruins emerged like bones from the woods. Jagged stone, moss-covered timber, that awful basement door half sunk in the earth, like it never wanted to be opened again. It was already ajar. Toby held up the crowbar. "We seal it. Whatever's inside, we close it off for good." Kara nodded, but her stomach twisted. "We have to go down first." He blinked. "Why?" "Because I think she's not the only one down there anymore." The air was colder than before. The descent steeper. They reached the underground chamber again, but it had changed. The pool in the center still sat, still and black, but now there were voices echoing through the chamber, faint, out of sync. The stone walls pulsed like they were breathing. Kara stepped closer. Floating in the pool was a child's shoe. Ellie's. She remembered it, but when she reached for it, the water rippled. A hand shot up, not a child's. Gray, bloated, webbed fingers grasping. Toby yanked her back just as the thing broke the surface, something that wore Ellie's face, but wasn't. Her mouth opened in a scream that turned into the whistle halfway through. They ran, out of the tunnel, up the stairs, and as they reached the surface, Kara looked back once. The chapel basement was full of eyes, watching, blaming, waiting, blaming, waiting. That night, another camper was gone. No sign, no noise, just a wet whistle left on his pillow and scrawled across the lodge mirror in salt. "You left us behind." The message on the mirror stayed there all day. No one dared wipe it away. Joey stood before it for nearly an hour, whispering apologies to no one in particular. When Kara touched his shoulder, he jumped like he'd been electrocuted. "I saw one of them," he said. "In my dream. She looked like my sister, but I don't have a sister." Kara didn't answer. She didn't know how to anymore. The fog didn't just distort the woods now. It bent their memories, turned thoughts into half-remembered dreams. Names vanished. Stories changed. At one point, a camper asked Kara where she had put the ladder. To cabin 13. There had never been a cabin 13, but when Kara looked out the window later, just beyond the edge of the fog, she thought she saw one. Crumbling, hidden behind trees. Door wide open, and a girl standing in the doorway, smiling. Kara returned to Ellie's journal. Pages were disappearing now, just gone. Torn out or erased. The ink was no longer black, but red. Not like blood, but something deeper, older, a single phrase repeated on every remaining page. "Bring them back. Bring them back. Bring them back." She slammed it shut. Toby looked up from where he sat guarding the entrance. What did it say? Kara's voice was flat. She doesn't want revenge. She wants company. That night, the fog entered the lodge, not as a mist, but as children. They stood at the threshold, 7 of them, all dripping wet, all smiling with mouths full of black water, and in one voice they spoke. "You were supposed to stay." Chapter 5. Ritual of the Drowned. They bolted the doors. Toby shoved furniture against the entrance while Kara herded the campers away from the windows. The 7 children outside didn't move. They didn't bang. They didn't scream. They simply waited, smiling. The fog wrapped tighter around the building, sealing it like a tomb. Joey vomited in the corner. "They're not alive," he whispered, shaking. They're not them anymore." Kara clutched Ellie's journal like a shield. "They're not ghosts," she said. "They're echoes. She's using them to weaken us, to replace us." The lights flickered, then went out. Someone began humming a lullaby in the dark. Earlier, before the sun had disappeared for good, Kara had found a missing page from the journal. It was beneath her mattress, stuck to the wooden frame with something sticky and dark. It held instructions, a ritual, not to banish Ellie, but to contain her. The ink on the page was different, etched deep into the paper like it had been written, in something heavier than blood. Symbols surrounded the instructions, spirals, mirrored eyes, and a circle with waves crashing inward instead of out. Kara copied the symbols onto a blank sheet of cardboard, torn from a cereal box. Her hands trembled as she drew. The ritual required 4 things: Something taken from the lake, something returned to it. A name spoken backward in the dark. Silence, pure and unbroken for 13 heartbeats. She read the list twice, then looked at Toby. "I think this is why she let Miles go." Toby frowned. "What do you mean?" "She gave us something back so we'd have something to return." They searched the boy's belongings in the half-dark lodge, guided only by candlelight. In the lining of his backpack they found it, a small wooden whistle, not the cheap plastic ones the counselors handed out. This one was old, carved with runes, wet and cold. Kara wrapped it in cloth and tucked it into her pocket. "The name?" Toby asked. Kara exhaled. "We'll need Ellie's full name. Eleanor Summers." "No," Kara said. "That's the name they gave her. I need the name she gave." They lit a ring of candles in the center of the lodge. The campers, dazed, but watching, sat around them. The walls creaked with pressure from the fog. Outside, the 7 echoes waited. The journal page crinkled in Kara's hand. She stepped into the circle and placed the whistle at the center. Then she whispered, "Eluhra." A name none of them had spoken before, not in this world. Then came the silence. 1 heartbeat. 2. 3. The fog pressed harder against the glass. 4. 5. The candles flickered. 6. 7. The children outside began to hum again. 8. 9. The floor creaked. 10. 11. Kara squeezed her eyes shut. 12. 13. The whistle exploded, not with sound, but light. Blinding, white-hot, radiating outward like a shockwave. The fog recoiled, screamed. The echoes vanished like smoke in reverse. And then, quiet. Kara collapsed. When she opened her eyes, the lodge was empty. No fog, no children, just the journal, closed. And beneath it, another page had appeared. 1 word. Almost. Kara stared at the word for a long time. It pulsed, as if the ink was still wet. The page was warm, the heat of something alive, or once alive, lingering beneath her fingertips. Outside the window, the trees stood still. The fog had thinned, yes, but not disappeared. It hovered just past the clearing now, as if reluctant to retreat. She stepped outside. The air was silent. No birds, no wind. Just a silence too complete to be natural. Toby followed her, eyes scanning the woods. "You think it worked?" "It worked enough," Kara said. "But not all the way." She held up the journal. Another line had appeared. Beneath the word, "She is not whole." Back in the lodge, Miles stirred from his corner. His eyes were clearer. His drawings had stopped. He looked at Kara for the first time in days and said, "The gate is still open." Kara crouched beside him. "What gate?" He pointed to the lake, to her, to the thing under her, the one that gave her the song. Kara's stomach turned. "To ice. She's only the beginning," Miles whispered. Later that evening, Joey returned from the Eastern Trail. He had wandered off, dazed, carrying something in his hands. An oar, old, splintered, marked with the name Camp Penumbra. No one had spoken that name in decades. "Where did you find this?" Toby asked. Joey blinked. "In the trees. I followed. The humming. There was a girl. She said she missed her brother." Kara turned pale. Camp Penumbra was shut down in 1963. It burned. Everyone drowned or vanished. Joey just nodded. "She said they all still sing, under the water, all the songs we forgot. The fog would come back. They all knew it now, because whatever Kara had pushed back wasn't finished, and Eluhra, was only one voice in a growing choir." Chapter 6. Drowning in silence. No one slept. Not truly. They dozed, one eye open, ears tuned to the windless air that blanketed Whistle Cove in a suffocating stillness. The fog hadn't yet returned, but the silence was worse. It was heavy, dense. as if sound itself had been swallowed by the lake. Kara sat by the fireless hearth, Ellie's journal cradled in her lap like a weapon. The pages had not changed since the word almost. The ink had gone dry. The heat was gone. And she knew, whatever Elura was, it had receded, but not vanished. The ore from Camp Penumbra leaned against the wall. Its presence felt like an open wound. Toby had suggested burning it. Kara refused. "If it came through," she whispered, "maybe it can lead us back." Back where? Even she didn't know. At dawn, the children began to speak again. They spoke in tongues. Not nonsense, but language Kara didn't recognize. Not Latin, not any dialect on earth. And in unison, every child, even the ones who had never met. Toby recorded it on his phone. Playback yielded only static, but when played in reverse, a single phrase emerged: "The drowned remember." By midday, the mist had begun to creep back. It slithered through the treetops first, curling like steam above the cabins, then dripping downward like invisible rain. A few of the children began coughing, deep guttural hacks that echoed as if something were lodged deep in their throats. Joey reported seeing shadows in the old arts and crafts building, long-limbed figures sitting quietly, rocking side to side, as if waiting for class to begin. No one else would go near the structure. Kara knew what was happening. Elura had opened the gate, but something else had come through with her. Something older, hungrier, something that wanted to stay. They gathered everyone in the lodge again. Kara, Toby, Joey, and the remaining counselors reinforced every wall, blocked the chimney, sealed the air vents with wet towels. It felt more like preparing a bunker than a cabin. But Kara knew deep down it wouldn't matter. You can't board up silence. You can't lock out the drowned. That evening, one of the younger campers, a boy named Evan, stood up during dinner. His eyes rolled back, his jaw unhinged wider than it should have, and from his mouth poured water, gallons of it. It soaked the wooden floor, rushing beneath tables, extinguishing lanterns, and in that rising tide came whispers, not just from Evan, but from the water itself. "I see you. I see what you left. I see who you let drown." Kara stepped forward. Evan collapsed. His body was dry, but the water kept rising. The water reached ankle deep before it stopped. Not drained, not soaked into the wood. It just stopped, as if held there, waiting. Joey moved to open the door to let it flow out. Kara grabbed his wrist. "Don't," she said. "It's not meant to leave." The lodge had become part of the lake now, part of the memory. Outside, through the fog-smeared windows, they could see figures gathering. Not the children, not echoes, adults, campers from decades past. Some wore 80s jackets, others had retro scout uniforms, old whistle lanyards, faded name tags Kara dimly recognized from her youth. They were all staring, expressionless, dead, and behind them something bigger, a shape in the trees, moving with the fog. Not through it. As it, Kara felt the name crawl back into her mind, Elura. But it wasn't just her anymore. It was many. It was them all. A scream split the silence, not inside the lodge, from underneath it. Toby was the first to react, pulling open the cellar door. Cold, wet air rushed up. The basement below hadn't existed in the lodge's blueprints. No one remembered it being there. But now, stairs descended into black water, and the whispering began again. Miles stood at the top step, eyes glassy. "She wants us to remember," he said, and then he stepped down into the dark. Kara shouted his name, but Miles didn't flinch. He descended into the dark water as if guided by invisible hands, his small figure quickly vanishing beneath the surface. The sound of the water swallowed him whole. No splash, no bubbles, only silence. Toby grabbed a lantern. "I'm going after him." "You can't," Kara said, grabbing his arm. "It's not a place. It's a memory. A trap." He looked at her, soaked with fear. "Then how do we get him back?" She opened the journal again. A new page had appeared, blank but for one line. "He must choose to return, or we all stay." Joey stood behind them, staring into the cellar like it had always been there. "Then we bring something that makes him remember who he is." Kara nodded slowly. "Something that anchors him." They found his sketchbook, damp but intact, full of his eerie crayon renderings, most disturbing but some gentle. One in particular caught Kara's eye, a drawing of his mom and dad standing by a tree, smiling. He had written his name across, the bottom in wobbly blue marker, Miles. She tore the page out, placed it in a dry Ziploc bag, and tied it to a piece of twine. "I'm going down," she said. Toby didn't stop her. She descended the steps alone, the water cold as ice. Halfway down, she could no longer see the top or the bottom. The water pressed against her skin like breathless fog. Then nothing, just weightlessness and darkness and voices, thousands of them, crying, singing, pleading. "Stay with us. You promised. Don't forget." She clutched the drawing close. "Miles," she whispered. "Miles, come back." He appeared beside her, drifting in the dark. His eyes were open but vacant. His mouth formed silent words. She reached out and pressed the drawing to his chest. "Remember." A beat, then two, then his lips moved again. "Mom." The darkness cracked. Light pierced through like blades of fire. The water screamed, and Kara opened her eyes on the cellar steps, coughing, gasping. Beside her, Miles did the same. The water was gone, but the cellar remained, and it was no longer empty. Chapter 7. The Last Campfire. The fire pit hadn't been used in days. It sat cold, forgotten in the center of the camp, blackened stones swallowed by creeping weeds, scorched earth stained with soot and silence. But on the morning after the cellar gave up its secrets, the fire was burning again. No one lit it, no one added wood, but there it was, flickering orange and red, crackling softly like it had never gone out. Joey was the first to see it. He didn't scream, didn't panic. He simply stared, then whispered, "They're back." Surrounding the flames were shadows, transparent, rippling, like heat waves rising from the ground. Campers, counselors, ones who had vanished over decades. Ones no one ever came to find. They sat cross-legged in the dirt, faces turned to the fire. Their mouths didn't move, but their eyes wept black tears. Miles saw them too. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He sat beside Kara, hand in hers, and asked, "Are they going to ask us to stay?" Kara didn't answer. She was listening. Because for the first time since the fog came, they were speaking. All of them. And they were telling the truth. The voices were like wind through tall grass, soft, overlapping, impossible to isolate. Kara strained to listen, kneeling by the fire, Ellie's journal open in her lap. The ink on the pages had begun to smear, warping into symbols she could almost, but not quite, understand. "Did you hear it?" one shadow said. Joey flinched. The voice hadn't come from a mouth. It had slid straight into his skull. "Hear what?" he whispered. "The promise." Kara's fingers clenched. Another shadow leaned forward. This one wore the remnants of a 70s lifeguard uniform, the whistle at its throat cracked in half. "We were told it would end," the spirit said. "That they'd fix it, that they'd close the gate." "They never closed it," another added. "They opened it wider." The fire roared higher, then a name echoed through the clearing. Elura. Every spirit turned their face toward the lake, and at the edge of the water she stood, no longer a child, No longer smiling, she wore the fog like a crown. Her eyes burned white. Kara rose slowly, the journal clutched to her chest. "Why are you here?" she asked aloud. Allura didn't answer. She glided forward, the grass beneath her wilting as she passed. One by one, the spirits around the fire turned to ash. Not screaming, not burning, just fading. "I think they're free," Miles whispered. "No," Kara said. "They're done." The last of the shadows vanished, leaving the fire burning hotter than it had all summer. But it gave off no warmth, only light. Harsh, white, like a spotlight before judgment. Allura stopped just short of the fire's edge. Her eyes, though glowing, seemed empty, like they were lit from behind by something else. Her gaze passed over each person. Joey, trembling. Miles, frozen. Toby, gripping a broken chair leg like it could protect him from what was coming. Then she looked at Kara. "You still carry the journal," she said. Her voice was layered, child and ancient both. Kara nodded. "It's yours." "No, it never was. It was theirs." Kara stepped closer. "Then tell me, what do you want?" Allura tilted her head. "I wanted to be remembered. I wanted to be heard, but now I want something else." The fire snapped. "What?" Kara asked. Allura's mouth split open far too wide. "To finish what they began." She raised her hand. The earth trembled, the lake churned. And in the distance, a second fire roared to life, atop the chapel ruins. Not orange, blue. A funeral pyre for something that had never truly died. Miles gasped. "She's calling them back." Kara turned, eyes wide. "Not them," she whispered. "Us." The chapel fire roared like a lighthouse for the damned. Smoke rose in spirals, unnatural in shape, curling into runes no living tongue could read. The fog that had once hovered now surged forward like a tide, swallowing the cabins, the trees, and finally, the fire pit. Kara, Toby, and the others backed away, shielding their faces. From the fog, shapes emerged again, but not echoes this time. These weren't the drowned. These were the devoted. Figures draped in wet cloth and fragments of camp uniforms, their faces hidden beneath carved wooden masks, all bearing the same symbol. A flame inside a circle of waves. "The ritual of the drowned," Kara murmured. "They've come to finish it," Joey said, stepping back. "Or start it again." Allura lifted her arms, and the masked figures dropped to their knees in unison. "The promise was made," she intoned. "The promise was broken. The debt must be paid." Her voice echoed through the clearing, rattling bones and bending branches. Kara stepped forward, gripping the journal. "What do you want in exchange?" she demanded. Allura stared at her. Her smile returned. "You already know." Kara did know. She just didn't want to admit it. The debt wasn't abstract. It wasn't metaphorical. It was blood, memory, lives offered and never repaid. The original ritual, the one that opened the gate, had taken something from the camp long ago, and now the gatekeeper wanted balance. "You want a life, Kara?" said Allura, blinked slowly. "No, I want the right one." Toby stepped forward. "Then take me." Kara turned sharply. "Don't." He raised a hand. "I was there in '84. I helped cover it up. I lied for them. For myself, I should have stopped it." Allura tilted her head. "You were a boy. You were scared." She took one step forward, and with it, the fire turned violet. "But you're not the one I want." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. Then Joey exhaled. "It's me, isn't it?" Kara spun to him. "No," he nodded. "I was there too. But not just that. I lit the lantern. That night, I sent her to the dock. I didn't mean to. I didn't think." Allura finished his sentence. "You didn't remember." Joey dropped to his knees. "I do now." Allura raised her hand. The fire turned black. Joey looked up at Kara. "Tell my sister I remembered, even if it was too late." Then the fog surged forward and took him. The fire went out, the masks fell to the ground, the devoted dissolved like mist, only Allura remained, and she wept. Chapter 8. What Lurks Beneath. The fog didn't return. Not right away, after Joey's sacrifice. A strange stillness settled over Whistle Cove, the kind of quiet that only follows a storm, not peace but pause. The survivors emerged from the lodge slowly, blinking into the late morning light, unsure whether to believe what they saw. The sky was clear. The fires were gone, and Allura had vanished. No ashes, no footprints. Only the cracked earth where the last campfire had burned black. Kara stood there for a long time. The journal had closed itself. The ink was gone, the pages blank. It was over, or so she told herself. By sunset, the lake shimmered like glass. No ripples, no voices. But deep beneath the surface, something shifted, a pulse, a breath, and far below the dock, buried beneath silt and bone and decades of forgotten names, something opened its eyes. Not Allura, not a child, something older, something patient, and it remembered every single promise that was ever broken. Kara couldn't sleep, not just because of the silence, but because of what had replaced it. Each hour that passed brought new signs. The fish in the lake floated belly up at dawn. The frogs stopped croaking, and on the sand by the old canoe launch, a message had appeared overnight, drawn in long, watery finger streaks. She was only the beginning. Toby found it first. He didn't speak. He simply sat down beside it, holding his head in his hands. Kara joined him a few minutes later. They stared at the lake, at the stillness, at the lies it held. "Do we tell them?" Toby asked. "The families, the press, the world?" Kara didn't answer right away. She thought of Joey, of Ellie, of Allura, of the things still unnamed. "They wouldn't believe us," she said, "so we pretend this never happened." "No," she said. "We prepare." Toby looked up at her. "For what?" Kara's voice was cold, for when it rises. 2 nights later the fog returned, not as mist, not as ghostly whispers, but as silence thick as tar, coating everything in suffocating weight. The camp's power went out at exactly 3:33 a.m., and at 3:34, every mirror in the remaining cabins cracked in unison. Miles woke up screaming. He didn't remember the dream, but he remembered the shape. Something impossibly large beneath him, dragging him through black water filled with teeth and music. Kara sat beside him for hours. She didn't ask questions. She just listened. She already knew the answers. The journal remained closed, its pages no longer blank. They were sealed, as if the book itself had locked away what remained, what could no longer be written without summoning it. But at dawn, the back cover split open. One final message had bled through the leather. The lake does not forget. The lake only waits. Kara tore the page out, burned it, buried the ashes, and still she heard it whisper. Not Allura, not Ellie, something else. The water had a voice now, and it had learned to call her by name. It's been 3 years. The camp was condemned. The buildings bulldozed, the land fenced off and sold to a private developer who promised to turn it into a luxury lakeside retreat. They lasted 2 weeks. The workers quit. The equipment failed. At least one man disappeared. No one talks about it now. But late at night, if you stand on the opposite shore of Echo Lake, what locals now call Deadwater Point, you can still hear it. The whistle. Soft, innocent, calling. Some say it's just the wind. Others say it's the story of a girl who was forgotten, a girl who was consumed by silence, a girl who became more than ghost, more than memory. But Kara knows the truth, because she still dreams. And in her dreams, the water never stops rising, and the voice it carries, It doesn't call for help. It calls for you. Subscribe to Crazy Real. Horror stories for more chilling tales based on true legends, whispers, and the stories we were never meant to hear.